Hello everyone, welcome to Gardening TLC. Welcome to my garden. I am Michelle and we are back at it in the Hosta garden today. But we're not going to talk about hostas. I like a good hosta, don't get me wrong, but there are so many other things that you can plant in the shade. So today's video is beyond hostas. I have 12 great plants that I want to share with you that you can plant in the shade. We also have 3 ground covers that we're going to cover. So let's get right to it, jump in and talk about beyond hostas. What can I plant in the shade? I live in Northern Illinois, Zone 5. I have been gardening my whole life. My dad actually gave me the garden bug when I was a little kid. Thank you, Dad, because it is a passion that I absolutely love. We are in my hosta garden today because we have been going around from bed to bed doing the cleanups and adding things or just cleaning the beds up. There's not a whole lot to do in the hosta garden. It's already weeded. I am going to add a pre-emergent for weeds, and I am going to add a fertilizer and a bait for slugs and earwigs, which I'll share with you in just a little bit. What I want to do first is talk about things that you can grow in the shade that aren't a hosta. It's the #1 question that I get asked at the garden center, so much so that I actually designed a class around it that I go down to the college and I teach the seniors. I'll have garden clubs come and I'll teach it there. I'll go to the library and teach the class there. So lots of opportunity to talk about different things besides hostas. First, I want to talk about shade though, and what is the classifications of shade. So you have what's called full shade. Full shade is 2 to 4 hours. It's when your plants are only getting 2 to 4 hours of sun. There is also part shade. Part shade falls into the range of 4 to 6 hours of sun. All of the plants that I'm going to talk about, all 12, and there's certainly more than this, but these are my favorites. They fall somewhere in that range. Shade is caused by a lot of different things. Like right now I'm sitting in the shade and it's caused by a tree. So we have back here what's called dappled shade, where light filters through the limbs and it's 4 to 6 hours of dappled shade. Now you also have heavy shade, wet shade, dry shade, shade that's caused by like a building on the north side of your property and you don't get any light because the shadow is created from the walls. So all different kinds of shade, and you have to kind of assess what kind of shade you have. Now, whether you have dappled shade, full shade, part shade, these plants will work in there somewhere. The one thing that you do have to be careful with though is, are you planting in wet shade or dry shade? Because if you do try to plant something that wants a lot of water in a dry shade area, you're probably not going to have as much success as if you plant it in a boggy area or you have a drip line to keep everything watered and watered well. The first 3 plants that I'm going to talk about are water-loving shade plants, and they really do want to have a lot of water. So if you have wet, moist shade, these are great, but also know that when you have wet, moist shade, you can have more spreading going on too because your plants are happier. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is a fern. Now, this is a Japanese painted fern. This one is called Silver Falls. Isn't it gorgeous? You can see that there's kind of a maroon stem on there. This guy grows in zone 5 through 8, and he needs 2 to 4 hours of sun. So this is one of those full shade ones. Now, if you can't get water to this, or it's not a wet area, it's probably going to crisp up in the heat of the summer, and you're going to not have great luck with it. Now, the one thing you need to know about ferns, though, is they can spread 3 different ways. The first way is they can grow an underground rhizome, and then it'll kind of come over here, and then it'll produce another fern. Another way is they have little bulblets on the bottom of them, and then they can spread that way. And they can spread by spores in the air. And what happens is on the underside of the leaf, you'll get this little bump or bumps, and those contain the spores. And once they ripen, they release, and then the wind catches them and away they go. They settle in the ground. They're like seeds, but they're called spores. And then they germinate and they grow. Now, they take a lot longer to grow, and I don't know that you're going to have like 100% germination rates, but they do spread that way as well. So if you like a fern, there's lots of them. There's lady ferns, cinnamon ferns, there's ostrich ferns, and I'm sure there's lots and lots of other ones, but it definitely will grow in the shade, 2 to 4 hours of sun. You might want to try it if you're trying to fill in maybe a woodland area. That's where I think they look their best. The one thing about doing videos in the shade is there are lots of birds, and they are all chirping this morning, so I hope they're not too loud. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is a ligularia. I grew these at my other house on the edge of a pond, and they loved their life there. They need 4 to 6 hours of sun, but they need water, water, water like mad. In mass, these are so striking. The leaf on this gets really big, and it gets this really tall, stalky flower over the top of the foliage. They get anywhere from 5 to 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Now, look at the flowers on this thing. Isn't that gorgeous? Now, this one is called the Rocket. They have other ones too. There's one called Cafe Noir that's really cool. They have a little rocket that's a little bit smaller. I think if I'm going to plant this one though, I want it to be big, bold, in my face, and spectacular. Now, it is a water-loving maniac. I tried to grow one that wasn't on the edge of the pond. I found that the first 2 years, I had to water it practically every single day. By the time I hit my 3rd year, the plant itself was full size, and I only had to water it maybe 3 times a week. That was still a lot though. It was pretty high maintenance, but it was well worth it. And if you can get drip to this and give it as much water as it needs, if you don't have wet shade, I think these are well worth growing. They are so spectacular. And talk about bold impact in the garden. That's bold impact in the garden. These grow in zone 4 through 8. Another water-loving plant that you can grow in the shade is Astilbe. Now, I do have 3 Astilbes growing here. They're up here behind me, but I'm finding I have to water them all the time because I just don't have enough water up there. It's drier shade, and they probably get a little more sun than they should. I've had Astilbe shame before where they all crisped up and died, but I do like Astilbes, and when they're planted in mass, oh my gosh, they are gorgeous. Some of them, like this one, is called Visions in Red. Look at the red stems on there up against that beautiful green foliage. And then when it gets its flowers, it's got some starting right here. There's one right here and one right here, but they grow up like this and they get this vivid red. I do like the Vision series. They have a Vision in pink, a Vision in red, a Vision in white. They are a nice size, getting anywhere from 15 to 18 inches tall. They are also 18 inches wide. These guys grow in zone 3 through 8. And again, this is that 2 to 4 hour range, so you can get away with a lot less light with these, and they're absolutely gorgeous. I brought another one too, which I absolutely love. I planted one last year. It's called the Dark Side of the Moon. This one is by Proven Winners, and I think the foliage on this is fabulous. And then look at this. This flower is just starting to open, and it gets like this neon pink color on it, and the contrast against the foliage is, oh my gosh, fabulous. I absolutely love it. So this one is called Dark Side of the Moon. I'll clean off that tag. 20 to 22 inches high, full sun, 2-part shade. Now, if you're going to try this guy in full sun, you better have water, water, water. But it can also grow in that 4 to 6 hour window. I think to have the dark foliage, you need a little bit more sun. So whereas the other Astilbe is like 4 hours or less, this one falls more into that 4 to 6 hour range. These guys grow in zone, I can't even read it, 4 through 9. So that means it can go up to minus 30 degrees in the winter and still come back the next year. But isn't that gorgeous? So Astilbe is also another one. Those are my 3 water lovers. Let's move on to some other ones. This is a lady's mantle, and I know a lot of gardeners out there use it. It is absolutely gorgeous. It is that beautiful sagey green that you can put in the garden, and it gets these chartreuse flowers all over the top of it, usually in the spring. This thing, when it gets water droplets on it, they like glisten because they make little bead drops on here. It grows in zone 3 through 9, 15 to 18 inches high, and 18 to 24 inches wide. Now, one of the things here in zone 5 that I found, because of the humidity, if I don't cut this in half when it's done flowering, like the foliage, the whole plant itself, I cut it in half, by the time I get to September, it's not really looking that great. I find that if I bite the bullet and I cut it in half right when it's done flowering, because I do want to remove all the spent flowers, it will flush new foliage and look good for the rest of the season. So it's worth that 2-week period of it being cut back and not looking real great to look great for another 4 months. So I love this one. Let me show you the ones that I have growing up in my garden. Number 5 on my list is a Bergenia cordifolia, and this one is called Happily Ever After. Now, this one is already done flowering. This is one of the early spring bloomers. What I love about Bergenia is, look at the foliage on this thing. Isn't this gorgeous? It kind of has a rubbery feel to it, so it really does well in dry shade. It needs anywhere from It'll grow in 2 hours of sun all the way up to 6 hours of sun. In the fall, this gets this red margin all over it, and then the leaves start to turn a darker red. It kind of goes from the outside in. Absolutely gorgeous. And you can see I've got a new leaf emerging right there. See the veining on there, how it's red? Isn't that gorgeous? So this is a Bergenia, and then the flowers, when they come up over the top of the plant. So this is a really nice edge of the border plant. It actually grows in zone 3 through 8, and the further south you go, the more this becomes a little more evergreen in the winter. It's great on the edge of a border. I love the white flowers that come up over the top of it. They have other ones too. There's one called Winter Glut that gets pink flowers on top of it. These guys are great. Growing in zone 3 through 8, 15 inches high, 15 inches wide. We're going to be adding 6 of these to our garden up top. In the design that we did earlier this winter, we're revamping this area over here, and that plant is part of that revamp. I can't wait to put these in. The next plant on my list is a Pulmonaria longifolia. Now, I'm going to show you the Bertram Anderson, and up here behind me I have some Mrs. Moon growing, and I'll show you those as well. These are one of the early spring bloomers that you're going to find, and when you get the flowers, they're a bonus. Most of the time on these, you are finding that the flowers are two-tone between blue and pink. Proven Winners has one called Pinka Blue that's really nice. I like the Bertram Anderson, the Mrs. Moon. I just like lungwort. The foliage is so interesting looking. So even when the flowers are done and you trim those back, you're left with this beautiful plant in the garden. Most of them are growing in zone 3 through 8, so they've got a really good cold tolerance. They're good on the edge of a bed or even just like the second row back. These guys are gorgeous. I love them. Now with these, light shade is best. They don't do really well if they have hot afternoon sun on them in any way, shape, or form. Where mine are growing, they're actually getting some sun and they're drooping a lot. And so I'm going to have to move them because I'm sick of watering them all the time. I find that if they're in lighter shade, like between that 2 and 4 hour range, they do better. They are also deer resistant because they have like little, I don't know, I'd call them fuzzy leaves. They kind of have some texture to them, and the deer don't like them, so they leave them alone. So you got to love that about them as well. Different ones get different sizes. The Bertram Anderson get 8 to 12 inches tall and wide, so they're not a really big one. The Mrs. Moon gets a little bit bigger. The ones that I have are about 12 inches high, but they're probably close to 2 feet wide. They really do like good draining soil. Mine are growing in compost. So this whole back bed, when I put it together, I just dumped a skidster load of compost back there, and then I planted in it. Ooh, everything back there is loving their life. And so they really do want good rich soil, and they do want good drainage. The lungwort that I have is Mrs. Moon, and as you can see, the flowers have draped all kind of down here, and it's done flowering. And I do need to come in and I will cut all of those off, but then see what's left is this beautiful foliage. And this is 2 plants. Okay, so there's one right there and there's one right there. So as you can see, they are about 12 to 18 inches high. And this guy, he's happy. He's probably 3 feet across, even though the tag said 24 inches. And this one's probably more like 24. But isn't that gorgeous? That is some beautiful foliage. The next one on my list is a Jacob's Ladder. This is a Pulmonaria reptans. This one is called Stairway to Heaven, which is one of my very favorite plants. This is absolutely gorgeous. Look at the variegation on there. Now, when the leaves first emerge, see how they have pink edges on them? Isn't that beautiful? And then look at that sky blue flower that it gets. Let's see, what's in its way? Get out of the way. Okay, see the sky blue flower on there? Isn't that gorgeous? I just like the structure of this plant. Now this one is past its prime. It's done all of its blooming, and I just happened to find one that had a little bitty flower left on it. I do have these growing in my garden. This is Stairway to Heaven. Okay, this is a very robust plant with interesting variegation that changes its color hue depending on the amount of shade and the time of the season. So earlier it's pink, later it's yellow. It really is a shade plant. It will not tolerate any sun. Well, it won't tolerate hot afternoon sun. 2 to 4 hours. Did I say this is zone 4 through 8? One of my very favorite shade plants. Now, I do have one from Proven Winners called Heaven Sent, and I'll show you that one. And I'll show you the 2 that I have planted. They like flank the entrance to the Hosta garden, and they are in year 2. And the Heaven Sent is in year 2 as well. This is my Jacob's Ladder right here that's growing. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous? It's already done flowering, but I have one there. And I have another one on the other side. I love these. It makes me stop and take a look at them. Let's go look at the Heaven Scent. All right, here's all my cardboard that I've been saving for a project that we've got coming up. Look at this Summon Substance Hosta and how big it got this year. I think it doubled in size. So here is my Heaven Scent right here. I want to actually get a Duravilla back here as well. And I think I have an animal that dug a big hole right there. So I'm going to have to figure out what to do with that. But this is the one from Proven Winners. It's called Heaven Scent. And now this is all green here. But when I planted it, as we progressed into the summer, the foliage got more of like a red hue to it. So it was really super pretty. And then this one has not flowered yet. It's just getting ready to. So the flowers on this one are kind of a lavender blue. Number 8 on my list is a Brunera. I love Brunera. Oh, and if I didn't say about that Jacob's Ladder, it's deer and rabbit resistant. Yep. All right. Now, the next one I have here is a Brunera. This is the Jack of Diamonds. There's a Queen of Hearts. There's also Jack Frost. All of them are great varieties. The Jack Frost has been around for a really long time. It's a non-proven winner if you're in an area where you can't get proven winners. Really hardy, really dependable. They come back every year, but look at the foliage on this thing. Look at that silver with those veining. Isn't that great? And the leaves on these, they get big and they're bold and they absolutely brighten up a shade garden. These are going to get 14 to 16 inches high and about 24 inches wide. These grow in zone, oh my gosh, I got to clean the tags off before I pull them out. These grow in zone 3 through 8. Isn't this gorgeous? Now, bonus with these is they get little blue flowers all over them in early spring. They're very, very hardy. They want good draining soil. They'll grow in anywhere from 2 to 6 hours of sun. You need to protect them from the hot afternoon sun, but they do need good drainage. I love Brunera. Now, if you give these guys some early morning sun, they'll be okay, but not afternoon sun. So keep them out of that hot afternoon sun. The other thing is, here in zone 5, I don't cut mine back. I find that if I just leave it up all winter and clean off any foliage that's left over, they seem to come back a little hardier for me every single year. Now, if I have a really harsh winter, which last year we didn't, it was pretty mild, but if I do have a harsh winter, they will die back to the ground, so I don't worry about it. But here, we never know what we're going to get, so I leave them up and then clean them up in the spring if they're still there. All right, next, oh, an old-fashioned bleeding heart. I love them. I have an Elba and an old-fashioned. I'll take you and show you my plants, but this is kind of what they look like when you buy them in the pot. They are really super hardy. They're very reliable. They'll grow in 2 hours to 6 hours of sun. The less sun they get, the more they'll hold on throughout the whole summer. A lot of times if they're getting like more on that 6 hour range of sunlight, they'll die back. These guys can get really big though. I've seen these old-fashioned bleeding hearts get 4 feet by 4 feet. I mean, even though the tag, what does the tag say? I know it doesn't say that. Oh, the tag says 18 inches to 3 feet tall and wide, but I've seen them get bigger when they're really happy. The flowers on these are fabulous, and I'll tell you, I will take you up and show you mine. I got mine as itty bitty cuttings that were this big from my friend Bev and Frank, and I planted 2 Elbas and 1 of the pink. Oh, I just love them. I'm actually going to dig out a little bit of them for my daughter and bring them to her house later today. Let's go take a look at the ones I have growing in the garden. Here is my old-fashioned bleeding heart. This has been in here for 4 years. It's actually in its 4th year. So the 4th year, it's pretty big. If you look at this, it's probably at least 5 feet across. Right now, it's probably 3 feet high. That's one plant. And it's happy here and it likes it. And it's going to get moved because I have another plan for this area. But I love the little bleeding hearts on there. But I'm going to dig a portion of this out and I'm going to bring it to my daughter. Isn't that gorgeous? Now I have a white one too. Now the white one's not as big. I did plant them at the same time. But here's my white one. This one's probably 3 feet, 3.5 feet across. And it's probably 2.5 feet high. But look at the little white bells on there. Oh, isn't that gorgeous? Next is a coral bell. Now, a coral bell isn't going to grow in deep shade. Most of them need at least 4 hours of sun. They don't want hot afternoon sun. You'll find scorching on the leaves if you try to do that. I find that morning sun is the very best to grow a coral bell. I have had better luck with coral bells that are purple, the darker purples, the caramels, the citronellas, a few of the red ones like the cherry colas, but I struggle with some of like the orange and the peach, and I don't know, I can't get them to come back. They are marginal at best for me. The one thing that I have found with coral bells is one of the things that I want to do in the fall is go and push mulch up around the crown. I don't cut mine back, and I make sure I tamp them in the ground really good going into winter, because we have freeze thaw cycles here. What happens is sometimes they'll heave up out of the ground, and that will take them out because the roots get all cold. So I find by tamping them in and covering the crown, or not necessarily the crown, but the base of the plant with mulch, going into winter, I have better luck getting them to come back. Now, this one here is a caramel. Most of them grow in zone 3 through 8. They are absolutely gorgeous, and they come in so many different colors. Oh my goodness. When you're looking for something to give you texture and color in the garden, and you can give it at least 4 to 6 hours of sun, morning sun is best, I would definitely try to pick up a heuchera. They can get expensive, so make sure you find one that you love, or if you can find someone that will split one with you, that might be a good way to get one too. The next one I'm going to talk about, I don't think a lot of people plant, but I really like them. Doesn't it look like an Astilbe? But it's not. This is a Goatsbeard. Now, this one is by Proven Winners. This one is called Chantilly Lace, and the flowers are fuzzy. They kind of look like an Astilbe flower, but they're white and they come up above the plant. They grow in zone 3 through 7, and what I love about these, they can actually handle the competition of being underneath a maple tree. Maple trees are notorious for being the hogs of everything, the water, the food, but these guys, I've grown them directly under a maple tree, and they've done really well. I love these plants. I think they are so pretty. Now, these guys, the Chantilly Lace, actually gets anywhere from 30 to 32 inches tall, but they have like a normal cultivar and what is the Latin name? I probably can't even say it. Aruncus. They have a regular aruncus that actually grows bigger, and I've grown those underneath a maple tree too. I just like this one because it's so airy and it's feminine looking. I just like it. Not a lot of people plant it, but super easy to grow, low maintenance, high impact. All right, last but definitely not least on my list, it's a Hellebore. You can't have shade gardening without a Hellebore. Not only do they bloom really super early here in zone 5, you'll start to see the foliage in March, and they're blooming towards the end of March into April, and they hold onto their flowers for a long time. In a lot of the southern climates, they are semi-evergreen, and they'll stay up through the winter. They get fairly large, and they're absolutely beautiful. Now, this one is called Ivory Prince, and you can see one little flower on there. They're kind of a green. Now, some Hellebore series, the flowers will grow more upright and some will grow more down. Most of them grow down, the flowers themselves, but they are breeding more and more of them to be upright. Now, this one here, it's also called a Lenten rose, and the reason they say Lenten rose is because it does bloom sometime during the Lent season. This grows in zone 4 through 9. It gets 12 to 18 inches high and wide. There are a lot of Lenten roses out there. They want 2 to 4 hours of sun, and they're deer resistant. Now, Lenten rose can get pretty expensive. I've seen Lenten roses be $40 before for some of the specialty ones. So if you're going to get one, I highly recommend you put it in a place where you can actually view it, because how many of you are really out in your garden in March? So if there's a sidewalk you walk up or a door that you go through and you've got an area where you can put these and you can see them, that's where I recommend you put them, because they can get pricey. But isn't this beautiful? I love it. A lot of times I'll do the Lenten rose in a pot that I'm going to use for the shade and let it just kind of be there through most of the summer, and then when it's done, I'll take it out and put it in the landscape, so I kind of get 2 uses out of it. But these are gorgeous. All right, I've got my snapshot here, which is my pre-emergent. It stops new weed seed from germinating. I am actually going to be sprinkling that on the ground in my Hosta garden because I don't want new weed seed to germinate. Now, it doesn't stop all weeds, and it doesn't stop the helicopters off of the trees, which is most of the weeds that I get in this garden, but it does go a long ways from stopping broadleaf weeds from germinating, and it stops that seed that comes, from the dandelions or the thistle or whatever. So for me, it saves me a lot of weeding. Now, this is the Hosta garden here. I absolutely love this garden. You can see here I don't have a lot planted here because the roots are really super thick. Now, what I'm going to be doing is planting some ground cover in here, and in just a second, I'm going to talk about the 3 ground covers that I brought over that I think are not too aggressive, but I think there's always a ground cover someplace that's aggressive somewhere. So use caution when you plant a ground cover and make sure that it works for you. But I'll talk about the 3 that I have. But as you can see here, the hostas are looking really good. They're starting to open up. But one of the things that I struggle with here is slugs and earwigs eating my hostas. So if we come up here, I'm going to show you one that is always, I think it's their favorite, because it's always the first one that they start to eat on. And you can see here some of the damage that's happening from that. See, they're already starting to eat it. So now is the time to bait. And I'm going to bait with a product from Bonide. So the biggest issue that I have with my hosta garden, outside of sometimes I get an occasional deer that comes and grazes through, and I can tell because they rip the leaves, and you can tell it's deer versus rabbits, because rabbits will give you a nice clean cut and it'll look like a 45-degree angle, whereas deer are kind of messy eaters and they shred because they don't have top incisors. They can only bite with the bottom teeth, and so they rip and they're messy. They leave messes everywhere. So that's how you know it's deer. I deal more with slugs and earwigs eating my plants than I do deer, so I use the Captain Jack's Bug and Slug Killer. This is a bait whose main ingredient is spinosad, and what you do is you sprinkle it around the base of your plants, and it draws the slugs and stuff out from your plant. They eat it and then they die. Do not apply this more than 3 times in a 30-day period. It's best to apply it actually right after it rains or right after you watered, because it needs water to activate it, and that's the best time to do it. The other thing is, if you get a really super heavy rain, then you have to reapply it. Typically, you know, you're applying it, I do it like every 2 weeks. I sprinkle it around the garden. You want to create a barrier around your plant, because once you draw them out, then they're not there, and then you've created a barrier around the plant. I find that this works really good. I know that there's tons of home remedies out there. I have no idea if they work or not. Chime in below if you've got one that actually works. I really don't want to hear about the ones that don't work, but if you've got one that works, let us know, because I know that earwigs and slugs are big eaters of the hostas for a lot of people. So let us know what you think. Also, if you can't find this in the store, I did put a link in the video where you can purchase it and have it mail ordered. I do get a small commission from anything that you order from my channel. Just know that if you can't find this, but it really does work. All right, I just found my first cicada, so let's take a look at what they look like. Ooh, he's ugly. He's big. There he is. Are you thinking about eating my plant? Because if you are, you're in trouble. The last thing I'm going to talk about are 3 ground covers that you can use to fill in your garden. Now, I'm going to be putting these in my garden, so I'm not afraid. I am going to be using ajuga. This is called bugleweed, and this is one that gets little flowers on it in the spring. It can be aggressive if it's really happy, so be careful. I've seen this like spread into people's lawns before. I'm going to use this at the edge of the border, because my goal is to have to use less mulch every year. Because I'm underneath a maple tree, every time I clean up in the fall, I lose half my mulch, and then I have to mulch every single year. You know as well as I do that mulch can get expensive. So I kind of want to have no mulch back here. I also want it to help me suppress the weeds, so I'm going to be using the bugleweed as one of my ground covers that I'm going to use back here. Now, bugleweed, or ajuga, this one is called Catlin's Giant. There's a lot of different ones. There's one called Pink Pewter. There's one called Chocolate Chip. There's so many of them. I like a lot of them. They have this black scallop one that I really like, but I want to use the giant one because I want to get better coverage faster. Now, this is going to bloom mid to late spring. Plant in sun or shade, so it'll actually do both. I've never planted it in the sun before, so I don't know if you'll have leaf scorching from doing that. It does want well-drained soil. It's going to grow 10 inches tall. And if I'm going to use plugs like this, which is, if you're ever going to do a ground cover, oh my gosh, do a plug. Most good garden centers, if you go and ask them to order you plugs, they will order them for you, because oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine how much it would cost if you were buying these in a bigger pot. So ask your garden center to order them if they don't have them. Most of them probably have the ability to be able to do that. Now, ajuga grows in zone 3 through 9, so it's got a hardiness of -40 and -40. Yeah, zone 3 is -40. Holy cow, that's really cold. This one, here's my description. Beautiful, upright blue flower spikes rise above large bronze foliage. This vigorous spreading plant forms lush, low-growing mats. Excellent for rock gardens, edging borders, or as a widely adaptable ground cover. So I am going to be putting this in along the edge of my bed here. Now, in between my hostas, I am actually going to be putting in a lamium, and I'll show you up at the top when we're done talking about these. I've already started to put this in. So I am going to be using a white Nancy. This one is a lamium, or some people call it a spotted dead nettle. Now, this is a ground cover that spreads as well. Again, be careful. Plant at your own risk. I'm not afraid of this one. I've planted it before. It's pretty well behaved for me. I like as it grows through the hostas. I like the color variation between the hostas. I like that sometimes you'll get a tendril that'll grow up through the leaves of the hostas. So I'm going to use this as my spreader to put in between those. This is a vigorous spreading plant that are easy to grow and very rewarding. Showy silvery foliage complemented by hooded white flowers. Now the ones that I have started have pink flowers, so I'm going to have a blend of both. This one here is called White Nancy, and it's going to get 6 to 8 inches high. It's going to be 12 to 24 inches wide, zone 3 through 8. So this one also has a good cold hardiness. I just really like this one. Let's say you have that one area in your yard, like underneath a maple tree where all the roots are on the surface of the soil and you have no grass. The area is getting bigger and bigger every single year. You've tried your best to get something to grow there and nothing will take. Try Pachysandra. It's not sexy. It's not the most beautiful plant in the whole wide world, but man, does it spread? Does it give you what you need underneath the tree instead of a bare, barren dirt area? And it does get little white flowers on it in the spring, but it's super hardy. It's semi-evergreen. It grows in zone, let's see, 5 through 9. It's going to get 4 to 6 inches high, 6 inches apart. And again, you get little plugs and you grow them, and they can handle the competition, and they'll fill in and they'll look good. And it's semi-evergreen, even here in zone 5. You don't cut it back. And if you get leaves trapped in it, you just take your blower and push them out like zoop, zoop, zoop. I love the noise effects that I make, don't you? Okay, but Pachysandra is one that you can get to grow underneath there. Now, another one that you could try is a big root geranium, or I think the Bevan's variety is probably the most popular one that you'll see. That's the only other one that I would think to maybe try. Again, as with any ground cover, they will spread, so just know that that can happen. There you go, 12 plants that you can plant in the shade besides a hosta, and 3 ground covers. And I actually gave you a little bonus one there at the end with the Bevan's variety big root geranium. So I am Michelle. This is all I've got for today. I'm actually going to get these plugs planted. We will be moving on to a renovation in the front yard next. I've got all my supplies ready. We did the design back in December. I'll link that video below if you want to check that out to see what it is. Ooh, what was that crawling on me? I am going to get these little plugs in the ground, not the Pachysandra. I'm going to be planting the lamium and the ajuga. I have 14 plugs of each, and I'm going to scatter those throughout the shade garden here and get those in. I am not mulching today because I'm saving that for when all the helicopters are down and they're still falling. We're going to edge and mulch all the beds at the same time. We will be moving to a front garden bed where we did the renovation, where we made the path wider. We're going to be moving to that bed next. We have all of the items that we are going to use to renovate that bed. I did a garden design back in December. I'll link that below. I'll also link below the renovation of that bed and what a hot mess it was before I started. And you can see that before we start, but that will be next week, so stay tuned for that. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, found some plants that you can love and put in your garden. I'm Michelle. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.